recorded. Be
Yep, I
there.
got it.
Cool. So maybe I could start with the case, and
Yeah,
then we
yeah.
can go from there.
That's it.
Yeah. So I have this teammate, a younger fellow, and I just introduced to like people management, and then like I see myself like years ago in him, which is like is just suffering with his work, and I guess we had the same approach. This like very I mean, I called it like wartime productivity. It's just
Mhm.
like, and I've been trying to structure the team, the company in a way that it allows for a lot of freedom and allows this kind of productivity, which is more peaceful with oneself.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. I've been thinking about like how do you I was like, is there any like is there a playbook which allows you to do that? At the same time, I'm wondering, I mean, is this something that he has to undergo himself? I mean, it's like there's the external environment which allows you to do this, but maybe at the end of the day, this is his journey to find.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I like to keep in mind is a question that goes something like who actually has a problem? If his wartime productivity style is working for him, then he doesn't have a problem in some sense, right? And lots of people get lots of shit done in that mode, and lots of stuff that they find really meaningful, and um, they're not feeling um, like they are struggling with that. There may be costs, whether that's costs to their health or costs to their relationships or something like that, but like as far as their sense of their own values is concerned, things are working. But then the second thing is like his approach might be causing issues for others, whether that's like he's harder to manage because of reason XYZ, or he ends up pressuring teammates to do stuff in ways that are bad for them, or just like the effect that he has on the vibe of the place is somehow not what you're wanting, in which case you have a problem, and that's your problem, that's not his problem. Or not, not immediately, but it is also the company's problem or the team's problem. Um, and so, there may be some way to bring that up, but there's a big difference to bring it up in a way that says like, you have a problem, you should be doing it differently, versus, hey, something you're doing is not working for me, um, which is kind of the essence of non-coercion in the first place.
Yep. Um, no, but it is causing problems for him as well because it's like we were talking about like I was telling him like in the past there would come a point where yeah I just pushed myself too much at some point like it's like I couldn't work because like I guess it's a burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And he says okay hey, I'm I'm undergoing the same thing, so it's just I guess this is also my way of like managing, not based on like because like my analogy is like the inner coercion and the inner peace. That the analogy there is like you're structuring the company that there's like it's based on like the most basic level reward and consequence. If you do this, okay, you're rewarded. If you don't do this, you are punished. But it's like that's analogous to also like just self coercion in my mind, and like it's like what's the more harmonious and like a way of managing people is which is analogous to like the inner peace you have when it's like uh, this productivity which is like more um without the coercion. So my guess is like part of it is aside from the external structures, like for instance s- the our the things we talk about in our one-on-ones and the things we reward. Um, I guess this also has to involve helping each one with um, I guess their journey. Because right now, so one thing we did, based on my experience of like seeing how personal health has a huge impact on productivity, my personal productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about health and health, wealth, and wisdom essentially
Mm-hmm.
in our one-on-ones. Like what are the fundamentals so that you could perform the best? And I mean this one is like I feel is like part of that because it's like part of health that you have an operating system that does not lead you to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking out loud, like how, like exploring this area. I was like, how do, what's the right way to manage, which is analogous to like peacetime productivity. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So a few things that come to mind for me. Um, One is that, as far as I can tell, the very idea that you, the um, the very idea that that part of what your role is as manager or boss or leader or whatever um, involves rewarding and punishing is part of the coercive frame in the first place. And this is more obvious with punishment, but even with reward, what you're dealing with is like a separation of what the person is trying to do and wants to do from from the concept that you are creating incentives for them. Um, Understanding the nature of incentives is really important, but at the point when you consider yourself to be creating incentives, you're sort of setting the system up for good hearting. You're setting the system up for um, attempting to meet what your demands rather than solve problems in actuality or do what feels right. And so when I think about non-coercive management, what comes to mind for me is helping people see the value of the work that they're doing, and focusing on well, two things. It's like the first order thing is focusing on feedback loops that are about as quickly as possible having people see whether what they're doing is working or not. But it's like whether it's working, like the feedback of this is working, this isn't working, isn't intrinsically reward and punishment. It's it's about information. Having said that, it's very common for people to interpret that information through a reward punishment lens. So the idea, hey, that worked, like that as a speech act comes across as praise, and they go, oh, I did it right. And then and then you say, that didn't work so well, and they go, oh, I did it wrong, and there's this like extra cringe or like pride or whatever that's actually that represents that the feedback is not purely flowing into their learning system. It's also flowing into some sort of like social okayness system um, or well-being, or like social well-being, or something like that. The question of how to give people enough security that that information can flow smoothly is a puzzle that's not solved as far as I can tell, because ultimately, organizations do at times have to fire people and so forth. But there are thoughts on this, in terms of what creates psychological safety. And there is also a puzzle where partly what you're going to get is people projecting past experiences of praise and blame onto onto experiences that they'll even project it onto in things that have nothing to do with them. They'll be like, I was punished for procrastinating this morning because I didn't get out the door in time and I missed the bus. Like, no, the world didn't punish you. That is just a consequence. That is just a thing that happened. You are not punished by the world for knocking the glass over by having to clean it up. That is simply what happened. But the punishment is a thing that the person induces, like in the form of guilt or shame or that kind of thing. And so part of what the learning process looks like in a group that's, or a team that's trying to move beyond coercion, is learning how to notice where we're still using reward and punishment, or notice where we're still using blame or shame or so forth, and finding different ways to relate to those situations. And that's both in terms of what we're saying, but it's also in terms of how we're receiving everything that happens.
Yeah. To make, I guess, so there, what I'm trying to grapple with is like, because there are financial consequences to good work and actual consequences to bad work. So meaning like, so for instance, if we do good work, our revenues increase. When our revenues increase, everyone should share in that consequence.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard to do that on the level of even 2 or 3 people compared to one. Like with Complice, it's like, if Complice makes more money, I make more money, because it's basically just a one-person thing. And so even if I don't understand how what I did made more money, which I often don't, it's more people signed up. I don't know. There's still a sense in which, well, somehow that was downstream of my actions and a bunch of luck and random happenstance. But as soon as you have even 2 people, it's like, well, whose actions actually helped here? And was it 50% one and 50% the other, or was it actually mostly one person's actions that made any difference? And it's really hard because those can combine additively or multiplicatively, or and that's just with 2 people, right? And so actually plugging people into the impacts of their actions is crazy hard. I don't know how to do it. Like that's unsolved from my perspective. But I agree, it's the right direction. Like the right direction is making the rather than there being a reward, just having there be a direct benefit feedback loop. And this is kind of incentives. People manage this when they have sales teams, right? Like the salesman will get a commission or something like that. And the commission is not a reward, it's skin in the game. Like it's a direct plug into the thing. But you can't do that for something where I don't know, like
in our case, it's we're doing service delivery. When we do work, it's like essential outsourcing of digital marketing with a partner in Europe. So our clearest success measure is that they like it so much that they get more people here to work with them. So that's clearly more revenue, and that's a proxy for their contribution. It's like we don't know exactly who contributes to what, but people could increase their salaries based on that overall increase in revenue due to the customer wanting to expand their the number of people they work with in our team. So that's a clear thing here. But also like there could be proxies. Like for instance, like just good feedback from our partner in Europe, or good feedback from the clients they work with. So those are like I don't know. That's how I'm thinking about it right now. To connect people's work to the impact they made, to the consequences of earning more.
And it's always going to be hard to connect that up perfectly, but even connecting it up somewhat, and checking that it feels fair for people, and that kind of thing is pretty valuable.
Malcolm, what problems do people usually like I mean, it's among people who are thinking about this, like you mentioned that there's it's not non-coercion in the broader conversation. You mentioned other integrative leadership or whatever. Like there are other words being used to describe this kind of effort to do, to lead in some sort of way, which is non-coercive. Um, maybe it's like is this still an open problem? It's like imagine this has been like a a desire of people for quite some time, like to move on from like this um to a new sort of leadership, which is non-coercive.
Well, the thing to realize is that it is actually remarkably new. I mean, people have been trying to figure out how to coordinate people for all of history, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what people do, right? Like that's but the assumption of what it means to to coordinate people, like what that consists of, what and is has evolved in that time, like in the history of people trying to coordinate each other. And so it's like, you don't have to go back very far, on the order of, depending on what industry you're in or what context you're in, anywhere from, zero to a few hundred years before it becomes obvious common knowledge that the thing you're looking for is obedience. That's just what you're looking for. Good strategists at the top and obedient people at the bottom, and that's what good human coordination looks like. Like you don't have to go back that far before that's just like how everybody obviously does it. And so all the effort going into solving the problem is trying to solve the problem of how do you get people to be more obedient, which is a different problem than the one we're talking about, which is how do you coordinate self-directed, self-authored, autonomous, non-coerced beings into achieving some larger aim.
Yep.
And so, no, this actually is, I would say, remarkably new. And even though most people, I think, in sort of, I don't know, liberal democracies or whatever, would agree that like the thing we need now is not just like obedient workers, it's like creative workers who can autonomously solve problems and stuff. Like even though people agree on that, their overall concept of what it means to do good work is still in many ways closer to old paradigms than it is to new ones. Like this is all pretty new. Like, started in the last couple hundred years and only became remotely mainstream in the last couple decades.
Yeah. So I have to go in around 10 minutes.
Yeah, cool.
But like there's this idea I've been toying with and playing around with, like, so because we are reacting to something negative, which is the coercion we ourselves experienced, and so we know this is bad. Could we find something better? I'm wondering if we could start from like a more fundamental level, asking like what is the purpose of leading people, and but putting, because like what you mentioned, like, yeah, the problem is coordination, getting people to do stuff towards a certain goal, collective goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the goal becomes like okay, this is the first thing that we need to solve. This is
Yeah.
what we are optimizing for. But I'm wondering if like, so we say that people come first or something like that. It's like it sort of makes sense, like people are more important than other things. So what does it mean to actually lead towards an objective, a project or whatever, a product, putting people first?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea I'm toying with, I'm playing around with, is like, so the project, the work, is just a playground for their growth, for their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the things you learn from this effort, which is, and the model I have is like the ancient Greek quartet of like, gaining in wisdom, courage, fairness, and like self-mastery. I mean, that's a very ancient framework. And these are things which can be learned through the actual experience of working with people, overcoming challenges. So with that in mind, it's like it's not already about removing the negativity of non-coercion, but starting from, okay, could we design our one-on-ones, the spreading of the resources we have as a company towards building, like helping people grow in these areas. It's like making this is a practice. This is a playground for you to have, overcome whatever internal difficulties you have, or to grow as humans.
Totally.
So that's where I'm trying to to build this, like like how do you design systems based on that fundamental, um, or that underpinning. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just still trying to you know
Totally. Well,
clarify, yeah, these ideas.
I think you make a good point, which is that like it's helpful to be able to point at coercive dynamics in order to really understand them and how they work and to sort of notice when they're happening. But ultimately, any attempt to simply avoid coercion runs into this trap that avoid is not a direction. Like you need actually somewhere to go. You need to go somewhere. And non-coercion doesn't actually quite point at a somewhere. And so, like one alternative that I've sometimes used is the idea of a collaborative culture. I've also really liked co-creative, because there's something richer about like we're co-creating something rather than just we're working together, which is what collaborative translates to. I've also recently been playing around with the notion of a therapeutic culture. That's kind of interesting, in part because like you can get into all sorts of legal shit about like what's allowed to be called therapy and so forth. But I do overall like the idea that the kind of culture I would want to live in would be one where almost every interaction between people is therapeutic, not in the sense of a therapist-client relationship, but in the sense of helping people make sense of themselves and their lives, and to untangle old learnings that they have that are no longer appropriate for the current situation. Like all of that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, you want that in your company culture. I want that in my company culture. Maybe not everybody does, but like a growing number of people want that. They want to be having new experiences at work and having growth and development and stuff. So one thing you might check out is, speaking in terms of development, there's a book called An Everyone Culture by Robert Keegan, Lisa Leahy, and a couple of other authors. And they talk about deliberately developmental organizations. Now, they're in some ways looking at a really high level, I would say. Maybe that's not quite the way to put it, but I don't think they really go nearly as deep as is necessary into the profound shift it is to move from a coercive culture to a therapeutic one. But they've got some piece of that pathway, and they've got some real case studies and stuff like that. Another book I will tentatively recommend, although I have not actually read more than the first few pages of it, is called A Foundational Explanation of Human Behavior: How to Get Beyond Observed Behavior to the Why of What We Do. And this is the reason I'm recommending this, and the reason I don't feel like a buffoon recommending a book I've barely read, is that what I know about the book is that it's an attempt to apply perceptual control theory, which is a model that I really like, to the question of how do we do management within a team. And so insofar as it's a good application of PCT, I think PCT is very relevant to this question. And so if the book is at all well written or well considered, I expect it to be good because the underlying theory seems to be really good. And part of what PCT points at is a difference that also has also shown up in some military frameworks in the last while. I don't know that the military frameworks are even that new, but it's a difference between what do they call them? Yeah, so it's a distinction between order command and mission command. And order command is like, like the thing that comes down from on high is do this. With mission command, the thing that comes down from on high is achieve this. So instead of trying to tell people what to do, you're telling them what outcome to achieve. And then they get to figure out how to do it, and they get to improvise within that. And this is much closer to the way that the brain actually works as far as the PCT model suggests. I will send you a link to an article that gestures at those two military things. Woo! Just hit my laptop. So yeah, I don't know. There's a few thoughts.
Cool. I also remembered a TED talk that might be that might capture this. It's by Itai Talgam. I think I don't know how to pronounce this. It's an Israeli conductor. I don't know if you've seen that, but he goes Itai Talgam TED talk. It talks about like leadership and uses different conductors as like models for different kinds of leadership. That might be an interesting way to present this because he starts from this very coercive reward punishment kind of conductor to what you mentioned is like co-creative. Like he says, like this conductor helps everyone tell their own story. Like each musician is allowed to tell his or her own story with the style of this conductor. Anyhow, that might be an interesting. Anyway, I'd love to talk more, Malcolm, about this. I mean, I'm just still exploring these ideas. I'll check out the books you recommended, and yeah, if you're available next week, would love to connect again and then explore these thoughts. I'm writing a chapter of a book right now on people management, and although it's not like specifically about non-coercion or something like that, but like I want to write about it also because I want to do it. It's like I want to do this, like build a team the right way and not to be a what you call this, to do something good. I mean, it's like I realize the power I have.
Yeah.
Running a team, it's like it's like I could actually mess up some people's minds or whatever, or I could do like this could be an opportunity to do some good for them. So it's like, I want to do this right.
Cool.
Hey, thank you so much. This has been great. And then, I hope to discuss this more with you and explore this idea with you.
Totally. What do you think about posting the recording of this?
I think it's okay. I mean, sounds okay. And then I'd love to have it as well because they want to take notes based on what we discuss and like, make those ideas more concrete after this.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I'll just throw it up on my YouTube then.
Awesome.
All right. Sweet. Take care.
See you around. Bye.